Joe, thanks so much for jumping on with me. So, obviously, just to sort of set the scene a little bit, I'm trying to publish more and more content that is going to help SME business owners with their hiring. I think that one of the ways that you can, or probably like the most significant way that you can scale your business is by getting the hiring decisions correct. So everything that I'm doing is trying to like lean into that question more and how do we get that right? One of the features that we want to do is where we talk to real small and medium-sized business owners like yourself and just have a conversation about what hiring means to you and some of your experiences. Because I think whilst like theory and frameworks and stuff are useful, I also think some of like the lived experiences from people who are doing it day in day out, like running their business nitty gritty on the ground, is just as useful. So I got a few questions, and yeah, let's just have a chat about like what hiring looks like in your business.
Sounds good.
So first things first, I just want you to give me an overview as to who you are and what your business is, just so that we can set the context around you and your company.
So I'm Joe Wadsworth. I'm the founder and CEO of the online recording studio. We are an online music production platform that connects independent singer-songwriters with higher level producers who otherwise wouldn't be able to sort of be connected. So for independent artists who want to produce and record their songs, but for any number of reasons, be it budget or experience or connections, might not be able to have access to that sort of caliber of producer, we bring the two together. And so over the past 12 years, we've produced, I don't know, more than 10,000 songs with several thousand artists, had about 350 million streams on our music, had songs placed into Netflix shows, Amazon shows, Hulu shows, and have kind of expanded out just from the core production service into promotion, release, and sync licensing services as well.
I mean, I absolutely love that, and I think that like is such a compelling value proposition. How did you set it up? Like, what was the starting point for the online recording studio?
So it started because really I went to university, I went to Leeds College of Music, and I got there and immediately realized that I might have made a bit of an error by going there. I was training to become a music producer, and I think I realized quite quickly that one, I didn't love music production in the sort of hands-on in the studio way as much as other people, but two, that this course was mostly taught by people who'd been to that university and done that course, which wasn't the huge vote of confidence in its ability to be able to prepare you to go and work in the music industry. And so I just thought it would be interesting to see what I could do on my own. And I'd never had an Instagram profile before I went to uni. I saw that everyone had Instagram, and all these artists were like posting videos of themselves on Instagram each day. And so I started looking at people on there and found that there were at that point 1 million new posts a day with artists sharing, just bedroom videos or, them playing acoustic guitar or anything like that and just singing their original songs. So I started talking to people and saying, hey, I'll produce your song in my room, like in my dorm room, and you record your vocals at home. And I, charge you 50 quid or 100 quid or something like that.
Yeah.
And very quickly, there was too much for me to do
Yeah.
because so many people were sort of up for doing this. So I started enlisting other producers from my floor and like other people from my university and sort of built this little kind of like agency type thing. Sort of the thing I was going to be doing when I left university anyway. So then I left uni and I'd actually was given some advice by your old man who said, if you want to do this, you should call it My First Single and you
Yeah.
should drop out of university
Yeah.
and you should just do it. And he was right. And I did.
Yeah.
And I called it My First Single for a number of years. And then we changed the name to the Online Recording Studio because firstly, I think the My First Single thing sort of made it seem we were just going to do one song with you. Like
Yeah,
it's
one
just
and
for
done.
total beginners, like one and done, exactly. But also, I think there was on more than one occasion some confusion about the word single being in there. I think people thought there was some sort of like dating aspect to the service, like genuinely. So So I just thought, call it the online recording studio. And this was before I even understood what SEO was. So
Yeah.
that was, and fortunately we managed to get the domain. And yeah, so over time we've then sort of increased the number of producers. We've got about 30 producers on the team now. And with that, all sort of different genres, and some amazing people who've toured with like huge artists or been in big bands and are now sort of looking at other opportunities and things. So we've really found a way to be able to bridge the gap between like independent songwriters and singer-songwriters and then producers who still work on like big label level projects, but those maybe only come twice a year, and so they need consistent stuff in between that. So their rates are slightly lower than for the label projects, which means that it's affordable for these other artists, and it's a really nice ecosystem.
Yeah, it really sounds like it. And those first few, I mean, let's call them hires, but those first few hires were those guys on your university corridor. You've had that a bit. I mean, and I think that's what entrepreneurs have to do. They have to like collect people and take them on the journey with them, which when you're at uni is just called like, can you help me out with this? But as the business grows and it scales, it turns into recruitment, it turns into hiring, and it turns into this sort of like talent acquisition process. So from the days of uni where it's the guys on your corridor to where you are now, just talk me through the online recording studios kind of team structure. What are the types of roles that you have? You've alluded to the sort of size, but just walk us through what your organization looks like in terms of the people in it.
So now the structure is, I would say, fairly typical of a sort of agency model. But I don't know. I say that not really knowing, not having worked at other agencies, but it seemed quite sort of a logical way to do it, which was we have the sort of bulk of the team is made up by producers who all work remotely. They have their own studios. They're kind of dotted around the UK and the US and Europe and all sorts of places. And because it's all done online, I've actually not met about 80% of them in person. So I've just seen, head and shoulders of them. Then there are 3 people who work in the office here who sort of manage the project, oversee the projects, but also are the sort of main points of contact when new artists come into us, who are sort of like the, I guess, more permanent staff. Now, what we found is that as we've sort of scaled up that team, we've experimented with different models to try and find a way to make it work, because we found that the sort of account manager plus then the person who's doing the delivery plus the salesperson thing was kind of overcomplicated and too many layers for what we were trying to do, which was really build a really personal relationship between not only the producer and the artist they're working with, but also the person, salesperson, I guess, for lack of a better word. We would say executive producer, who would be the person that brought that artist in. And so really we've got salesperson who brings them in, and then we've got the producer who handles it, and we've got a sort of ops manager who oversees the projects but never liaises directly with the client. And so when we're hiring for the producers, it's a very, very specific niche. It's a very specific skill set, because being good at making songs is a given for the role. And there are a lot of people who are really good at making songs. And so when I say that, I mean someone who can be very, very self-sufficient, a sort of one-man band type person who can play a bunch of instruments, has the facilities and the ability to record those things well, can do mixing and mastering, which is sort of the, the post-production sections, and really can be very, very self-sufficient. That is what would get you the interview, is being able to do that. Just the sort of skills for the job. That's where we try to differentiate ourselves from sites like Fiverr or Sound Better, these like freelancer marketplace websites, because that's all done through a sort of dashboard and it's not a very sort of human interaction. So because of that, the other half of what's required from those producers is that they are really, have really good interpersonal skills, like inspiring people, interesting people, and people who can really represent not only what we do, but represent their own work and give the artist that they're working with a great experience. Because I think particularly as we move more and more towards more generative tools being used within all of the creative industries, I think that we have to lean more heavily onto the personal elements and the sort of human interaction and the human collaboration that exists within making music, and sort of using tools to facilitate that relationship further rather than replacing it. So it's a very, very people focused interview process where we don't really talk about music all that much in the interview. We just talk about how they engage with other people, you know, how they manage projects, what their relationships are like, how they do certain things. And to be honest, those interviews are mostly about just getting a good vibe from someone than about specifically answering very detailed questions of things.
Yeah. You're observing, you're making judgments, like in the background, you're having a conversation with them, but your mind's like doing all this work to try and understand, like in the mental scorecard that I've got around these interpersonal skills or the things that are important to me, sort of what score am I giving them? Am I ticking the box? Am I giving them whatever, a 5 out of 10 or 8 out of 10, something like that?
Exactly.
So what I was going to jump in with before was, like, it seems like you've landed on this notion of, yes, you've got like this, of course. And I think with a lot of roles that people are hiring for, the skills is always a component. In a business like mine, quite often we're hiring for people to do customer support. So the skills to do that, what you would call producing the song, they won't always have that because our industry is super, super niche. We have to teach them those skills quite often. So sometimes, like in our business, how it differs, it's not a case of does this person have these skills? It's what's their ability to be able to learn them. So we've all got the skills. You might attack it one way or the other, but then like layering over this, whatever it is, like personality traits, sometimes people call it culture fit. When did you realize that like the intersection of those two things was so important? And did you ever hire without making like that sort of dual assessment?
With producers specifically, or just like
I guess
general?
so, yeah.
I mean, with producers specifically, definitely. And even up until quite recently, because I think it's challenging when prior to someone getting their first project from us, I probably only meet them twice. And once is the interview, and then the second time is their onboarding session.
Yeah.
And that's why we sort of give people a trial project. But yeah, I mean, I think even quite recently, we had a producer join the team who presented very well in his interview, and I got a good vibe. I thought that he was maybe took himself a little bit seriously, but that's okay, because sometimes with the artists, they actually appreciate that kind of thing from a producer, because it sort of adds a layer of credibility, and you know. And he came he'd won a bunch of awards for his music and all that sort of stuff. And I think that very quickly we realized that whilst he was technically like a brilliant producer, like one of the best we've ever had, there was an aspect of him kind of feeling like the work was sort of beneath him. And I think that's something that we didn't pick up on at all in the interview. I didn't pick up on that at all. And I think over time it started to show itself in kind of little ways where it would just be sort of little basic things where things would get missed, or the way that he would respond to a client or something like that would be a little dismissive or something. And over time it started being that actually it sort of developed into the work that he had to do almost being sort of presented by him as being sort of an inconvenience that for this other stuff that he had to do. And I think, you know, we quickly realized that was probably not a good fit, but it was an interesting balance because he was such a good producer, like really amazing, and, you know, very, very successful in his own right outside of the work he did with us. But just wasn't a good fit for this. And I think there've been several over the years where we've realized that there've been people I've hired in years ago who were really great on the kind of personal side, but maybe the mixing and mastering or like the final pre-production wasn't as good as it needed to be. And so I think it's not a perfect system. I still don't have a sort of an exact algorithm for who the exact right person is, because I think that keeps updating when we find someone new who we're like, oh wow, actually this person is really good. And that is maybe making us rethink some of the people who've been with us a bit longer.
Yeah, absolutely. You get like a firmware update every time you hire someone.
Yeah.
It alters the selection algorithm. I mean, my team here, I think they get so frustrated with me. I feel like I literally update our recruitment process every time we hire someone new, because I'm always like learning something new from the last time.
Yeah.
God, Jack's moved the goalposts again. But I do really think it's important to like learn from every single one, and kind of move forward with it. But no, that's interesting, and the specific context of what you're doing is really useful there. Um, Final question, just in the term of like setting the context of your business and what hiring means in there. How important, or where does hiring and recruiting sit in the list of your priorities? How present
During
how present is it in your mind on a daily basis? Is it something that you're always thinking about, or is it just like workload's ramping up? I think we need to hire someone, and you'll kind of go into hiring mode. How does it sit in the list of what's on your plate of things to do as a founder, CEO, operator of your own business?
Sure, honestly, I don't think about it until I have to, and then it's
Yeah,
all I think about.
yeah, fine.
Um, I think when we know that we're going to have a very busy period in a month's time or a couple of months, if we secure a partnership or if we're sponsoring a big competition that we know closes at a certain time and we're going to get a lot of people coming in, then we'll then spend a lot of time making sure that we're hiring people. But fortunately, right now, I think we have some name recognition within our industry, and so when we put a job ad up, we get like thousands of people who apply from all
Yeah,
over. And so
yeah,
actually we only keep the job ads open for a day or two and then go through all of those. And I think that's indicative more than anything of what we're doing. I think it's indicative of like the moment that we find ourselves in for freelance
sure.
creatives.
Yeah,
I think consistent paid work is very difficult to come by. So anyway, that's a side point. So yeah, in terms of recruitment, either when we know we've got a busy period of work coming up, it'll be a really key focus for us, or I suppose at the sort of beginning of each 6 or 12 month period of strategy, if we know we're going to need an additional pair of hands on maybe the sort of permanent team, um, then it will be something that we're taking very seriously. But I think I try to make it something that when we do it as well as we can, so that we
yeah,
don't need to worry about it most of the time, because
yeah.
it's not my favorite thing to do, honestly.
Yeah, no, and I don't think you'd be alone in saying that. I think there are a lot of founders out there who kind of shudder at the prospect of, oh God, I've got to hire someone, and they don't know where to go. And I feel that's like a really big part of what the message that I'm trying to get across. And I think hiring is sort of like a muscle that has just never been taught. I mean, a lot of things in business you'll never get taught in school anyway. You've got to sort of figure them out as you go. But
Yeah.
hiring and recruitment, I think, is one of the things that there's no education around it. You'll either just sort of like, okay, well, let's slap a job ad together, let's stick it on Indeed or LinkedIn and hope for the best, or you'll kind of bundle everything up and throw it at a recruitment agency. I'm not saying either of those two approaches is wrong, but I do think there is, like, in the same way that I'm sure you will have taught yourself a lot about sales and a lot about marketing and a lot about like financial reconciliations and operations and governance and stuff like that. I feel there's like a missing gap for this notion of like learning how to do hiring, and that it's a muscle that can be trained
Mm.
in a business sense. So I think where you are and how you feel about it right now, and to be honest, I'm like super impressed that when you put a job ad out, because of your reputation, you're getting thousands of applications. Like I'm not in that position at all. Like often we're hiring out of a local like economic area where we're
Mm.
based here in the northwest of England. And sometimes we can put job ads out there, and it's like crickets. And there's a lot of talk these days on LinkedIn and on social platforms about, oh yeah, all these hiring managers are being like inundated with all these applications, and there's all these AI bots that are like spamming and everything like that. And the amount of applications people have to go through is just this huge workload. But I think there's like a quiet section of the SME market who still really struggle with this and are not seeing those challenges. And this stuff is for them really.
Mm.
So I think what you've done in terms of reputation, you've done something, whether subconsciously or like proactively, that means when you're putting a job ad live, people want to come and work for you. That's a really powerful position to be in. So you might want to do a bit of thinking about like what it is, because even if it's not a priority, if you're getting those results, you're doing something right.
I think partly my thinking there is if it's working okay, I don't want to touch it
Yeah.
because I might break it. So I don't know what it is. I mean, I think it's a combination of I think people know we've been around a long time, and I think
Yeah.
the name does us a lot of favors because it's quite a sort of on the nose name. But to be honest, I'm pretty sure our job ad is the same one it's been for at least like 5 or 6 years, and we just repost the same one again, and
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
we get the right. I don't think we've really changed it, other than maybe I think we pay a bit more than we used to, so we've increased the sort of the fee on it. One thing I wanted to mention because I think this is interesting. If the goal of this series of content is like helping SMEs with recruitment or training those skills, training that muscle, as you put it.
Yeah.
I think one of the challenges is that I think for like 90% of the time, it's not relevant because you don't need to hire someone. It's
Yeah.
kind of like when it's like how all those like big like next generation mattress startups struggle because people only buy a mattress once every 10 years.
Yep.
So like you don't get the repeat business necessarily as you would with something like that. So it's like, how does training people or how do you make something like recruitment feel like something that does have a sort of relevance more consistently when actually I think probably for a lot of founders, you only really think about recruitment when you're like gearing up to recruit people or if you regret someone that you have recruited.
Sure. Because I think the most powerful tool in your toolbox as a business owner is bringing the correct people into your business to move it in the direction that you want to move it in. And often like getting the wrong people out as well. So we talk about hiring, but there's an element of this which can be about kind of like firing as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's that whole concept of team building. And I think sometimes people will shy away from it. People will ignore it. People will say, oh, do you know what? Like, yeah, the demand has increased a little bit, but I'm just going to spread my team maybe like a little bit more thin across the problem and we'll just bed in and keep going a little bit longer.
Sure.
But I fundamentally think that the right hire can make your organization and the wrong one can break it. And you're absolutely right. People aren't, I'm not hiring every like day or every week or every month or anything like that. We go through some busy periods and we go through some like really, really quiet periods with it as well. But when it lands, when it's on your desk, when it needs to be done, it's like if you get that thing wrong, the time that you will lose further down the line is just monumental. Yep. So, and I think that's often why people will default to whatever it might be, the recruitment agency, or they'll default to ignoring the problem for a little bit longer. I just think there's so much at stake and there's so much jeopardy when you're making hiring decisions. So it's a great question, and it's probably like the most fundamental question to the whole point of this series.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it just stems from that belief that people are the fuel to business growth, and you've got to get it right for your organization. Who's right for your organization, maybe who's wrong for mine, and vice versa. So there's
most likely, I think.
Most likely,
I don't know how much crossover there would be.
No. I mean, unless we sort of do the whole into music production as well, maybe not much. But I think the key to this is understanding like what you need, and then being able to source that, being able to select that, and I guess as well like being able to retain it. So yeah, I mean it's a good question, not necessarily with the simplest answer, but it stems from my belief that is the sharpest tool that you've got in the box to run business. Right, so we're into the sort of best hire, worst hire bit. So do you want to walk us through your best hire story and your worst hire story? What we're keen to understand is not necessarily like who they are, because we don't want to. Well, I mean, you can out people if you want to, but we're not sort of interested in necessarily identifying specific people. We're interested in identifying the lessons that you've learned from the best hire that you've made, and the lessons that you learned from the worst hire that you've made. So yeah, talk us through that, Joe.
Sure. Well, the best hire that I've made still works with us and is essentially number 2 at the company now. Hired him initially as an admin assistant when we were doing some projects where we were working with an artist who was in the US who required a lot of sort of administrative stuff, because we were doing more like a kind of 360 deal with this artist where we were managing all aspects of her music. And so he came on as a kind of extra pair of hands, but was and is very successful with his own music in his own right. He's in a big band and they have, 50, 100 million streams on their music. And he was sort of looking for something more consistent in between touring and things like that. And so was here on a global talent visa. And he interviewed very, very well. And I thought in the interview that I said to him, I think you probably should work in sales. And I think at that point, I sort of knew that I would at one point, if he stayed with us, see how we could maneuver him into a more kind of sales position. I think some context here. Our sales process is incredibly specific because we're selling songs that are custom productions. So the sales process is actually one of artists sending us rough recordings of their songs or just voice memos, us then having a discussion with them about the sort of direction they want to go in it, but the instruments they want, the references, the kind of sound. So it requires a real breadth of musical knowledge and references, plus an element of sort of musical vision, and also sales ability.
Yeah.
And those, finding someone who like has all that stuff with music and finding someone who also has that same level of like sales skill has been very, very, very difficult.
Yeah.
Like really hard. It's taken,
This is
I'd
your
say 7 or 8 years.
This is your unicorn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, because either you find people who are really good at music, but the reason they're really good at music is because they spent all of their youth like indoors, never speaking to anyone, and so they don't have the sales skills, or you find people who are really good at sales but don't have the sort of musical knowledge to be able to do that job. So with that said, this person was like admin assistant for a while and was monitoring all the projects, and then became sort of more operational and was just like overseeing all the projects and doing all that sort of stuff, and was really, really good at it. And I think was really committed to the business, and I think a really good kind of personality for what is a very agile business, and also quite inconsistent in lots of ways. I think both because of the industry that we're in and what we're trying to do in it as a kind of outsider in some ways, but also just in as much as me trying to learn how to run a company that is scaling and not always getting it right.
Yeah.
He's been very, very committed and consistent and sort of stuck with it for, I think, probably 3.5 years now. I think he's been with us.
Amazing. Because I think what you're describing, like the combination of skills and traits and like the culture fit, is probably the thing that's embodied in the founder, i.e. you. Because when you start your business, the first thing you've got to do is make a sale, right? So you're probably doing the sales, you're bringing the vision of the business together, the technical skills, the musical vision that you talked about, like you're overlapping all of those things. But it gets to the point where you're like, I personally can't do this forever. I can't be the bottleneck for this in my own business, particularly if I want to scale it. So like finding that one person. So I think there is always that one hire who is kind of like a mirror, almost like a mirror image of the founder, that like unicorn that I described. And it sounds like you've found that person.
Yeah, I would say so. Because he sat next to me for, I guess would have been about 2 years while I did all the sales. And
so he learned through like absorption.
Yeah. And I would intentionally not do it with headphones. I'd leave it on, and I sort of would make sure that he was following. And I'd sort of always been dropping hints that he should move into sales. And then eventually, when we sort of signed up with a couple of like partnerships where we were sponsoring some songwriting competitions, so we were getting like, hundreds of people were booking in consultations to talk to us about their music. I just went, all right, now you. And I think to begin with, I didn't train him at all. And I just went, just do it. Let's just see what happens. Because fortunately, we were in a position where we had a level of volume of people coming in that I was like, just go ahead and do it. I think he closed the sale on like his second or third one. And I was like, great, this is excellent. So then we did a bit of sales training.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I've only ever read one. I didn't even read it. Well, I've only done one thing of sales training. I listened to the book on tape of the guy from The Wolf of Wall Street, Way of the Wolf. And it's him like narrating this book, talking about how he does sales. And I listened to, I think probably about 2/3 of that. Yeah. And so I sort of secondhand taught this guy that stuff from that. He listens to that book as well. And now he is excellent at sales. And we've now moved him away from the operational stuff. We've got someone else in that role. And it's honestly, it's the job that he should have been in from the very beginning in some way. I mean, he couldn't have been, but it's such a good fit. And he's brought such value to the organization, not just through his ability to like learn and change and adapt and do these things, but because I think because he's seen how many times things have gone wrong and stuck with it, he has a real tolerance for that sort of stuff and a sort of patience with it. But two, I think enough stuff has gone wrong for him to feel comfortable enough to be like, this is about to go wrong. Let's do this in a different way. So yeah, he's great. I can't speak highly enough.
Sounds like an what we'd call an A player.
He is an A player. Yeah.
What
Yeah,
was
the end.
it? Um, when you interviewed him, when you met him, when you saw his application, I mean, a while ago now, but what's the one thing that gave you that gut instinct that this guy is worth taking a chance on? Because you brought him in at entry level, but now he's your number two. So the journey, I know you're a small business, but like the amount of responsibility and trust that you give him now is obviously increased dramatically. What was it about that first encounter or that interview process that what's the one thing that stood out to give you the confidence to push forward?
Honestly, I would say that it was despite the fact that he had been so successful and was continuing and still is successful with his own music in his own right. Like his band just toured across the whole of Asia and like they're a huge band. He didn't come into that interview with any kind of ego, and his approach was whatever it is that needs to be done, I'm here for it. Like this is what I've done in the past that makes me suitable for this. There was no like, people are rarely actually as like this, but like there was no sort of do you know who I am sort of approach like in any way, which can exist in our industry a lot. And I think that just his approach to like, yeah, I'm here to do what needs to be done, and just he'll just crack on and do the things that he needed to do. And then I just think he came across well. Like we got on well. I think he had obviously spent time researching what we do and like came to the interviews with ideas. Yeah, I thought it was very good.
What I'm hearing there is, I'd say two things. I think firstly, it sounds like, and gut feel is a huge. You should listen to your gut when you're hiring. I think it's massive. What I want to just pick up on quickly is this no ego thing. Do you have like company culture documented or like values or anything like that? I mean, it may not feel appropriate for where you are, but is that something that you have, Joe?
Yeah, we do have that. We have a couple of documents, but this is just for the producers, really. I think because the core team is essentially me and two other people.
And does the no ego thing like translate over into your culture or your values somewhere?
I would say not directly, but yes, indirectly. So we have a thing in our training documentation that says that there are like three tenets or three pillars of how we approach projects with clients, and those three things are confidence, empathy, and authority.
Yeah.
And essentially what that means is like come across well, be nice to the people that you're working with, and be clear that you know what you're doing without being a dick. And so I think that the no ego thing is important. I think that the most important thing for our organization is transparency. That's where most of the sort of, certainly from a kind of customer facing side, it's about transparency and safety. And so I think that's what we try and instill as much as possible in the producers. But it's interesting with like actual culture. I think that there isn't anything for the sort of the office team that is documented or is sort of encouraged. And I think as we scale more people in those sorts of like desk jobs, then probably it will. But it just sort of is what it is.
I mean, it's great that you've got that starting point, and I'm sure like the culture that you want to impress in the producer community, it would make total sense to make sure that there's a flavor of that lives in the office environment where it's like your employees and you're seeing them every day. And to be honest, if there's only a few of you, like the team self-organizing, the culture probably doesn't need to be defined because it's like a little WhatsApp group with you, like your three best mates. Like everyone understands the culture without having to need to write it down. But
Yeah.
as the business grows and as it scales, I think once you get past sort of between 10 and 12 people, basically the WhatsApp group is too big and people start putting it on mute. Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah, yeah,
that's
sure.
that's the point where you need to think about like structure and maybe like management and writing the culture down and stuff like that. But I really feel that anyone else you bring into that team right now, think about the cultural bits that you want to make sure that you protect what you've got today, like
Mm,
right now. And I'm sure the no ego thing from when you first interviewed your number two is something that probably remains today, because if it resonated so strongly with you then, I'm pretty sure that, knowing you like I do, like the commitment that you've got to your business, you want to protect that, and you don't ever want to like lose sight or control of what that culture looks like. And hiring for culture, I think, is a fantastic starting point as you grow. And if you can look out for the no ego stuff, and I'm sure there are three or four other things that you
mm.
could probably identify. I think that's a really important thing to be like testing against or cross referencing as you interview more and as you hire more into the office team.
I think as I learn more about management and an organization that's scaling and all that stuff, and there is a lot of talk of culture,
Yeah,
I think that my concern always is being as light touch as possible with any kind of culture.
yeah,
Little tiny nudges and like just sort of steering things in
yeah,
certain directions, because I think that particularly, and this may be true in every industry, but I think particularly where what we're doing is such creative stuff, I think that there is a natural level of cynicism that
mm,
exists when there is the sort of corporate aspect of the creative industries, because everyone in one way or another who works in the team is an artist themselves. It's
yeah.
interesting because our team are only the other side of the coin to our customers.
Okay.
And so I think with culture, it's always, obviously the no ego thing is really important and it has been fundamental to how we have people in the team. I think maybe this is my own sort of insecurity as a manager, but I think that I'm always really tentative to try and organize the way people are just interacting or the way that they're approaching stuff. And I think it's much more to do with the outcome, like the results. If we get all the stuff done and everyone's happy, I think then culture is good and things are working okay. I think I would maybe be concerned that I would probably be too heavy-handed in my approach to like try and do that. Like,
Def-
the one
and
person in the WhatsApp group who's like, and here's our itinerary for tomorrow, gang.
sure. And I think this problem, if you want to call it problem, doesn't rear its head until team size, I think, reaches a certain point.
Hmm.
So I think light touch right now is perfect. I think with it, with three, four people in the office team, I think that light touch is exactly what's needed. It organizes itself. It controls itself.
Hmm.
Like people will ideally sort of like check each other as well if there's something that's happening, if there's some kind of behavior that's like shown that's just a bit like, hang on, that's kind of not what we do here. You'd maybe expect that somebody in the WhatsApp group, somebody in the team will maybe just like call out or question it. Maybe they do it in a bit of a jokey way or a bit of a fun way or something like
Hmm.
that. But when the team size gets bigger, it doesn't always happen. And that's where controlling it, maybe want to try and find a better word than controlling it, but understanding it, influencing it, kind of
Hmm.
nudging people back on track with it, the behaviors that you want to see, and just like the way we do things here. So as you scale, I'd just say it's just something to watch out for. But like the culture thing is so important because it flows through the business day to day. But then when you're hiring, when you add a new, it's like a soup. Like you add a new ingredient into the mix, and it just kind of changes the composition of everything. And sometimes you can add. Can you like take away? Yes, occasionally, but like be careful what ingredient you throw in to the mix before you know what's going to happen. The analogy's gone too far.
It's a very northern analogy.
Right, tell me
Yeah.
about your worst hire.
It makes sense to pick someone from the sort of office team as opposed to a producer, because
Yeah,
there's more at stake and it's a more in-depth sort of role and recruitment process. So actually, the person who I hired, I think it was maybe before the person who then became our best hire in that same sort of position, was a person who was recently had recently moved over to the UK, having had a very, well, seemingly very, very successful career at high level in the music industry in Europe. They had been the manager and actually long-term partner of quite a big pop star in Europe. They were sort of coming over to the UK to reinvent themselves. I think they'd split from their partner, who was this pop star, but you know, the involvement that they'd had at such a high level within music of, you know, major awards, like hundreds and hundreds of millions of streams, worldwide tours, like all that sort of stuff that was like incredibly valuable experience and understanding. And this person came in and they interviewed and they presented themselves very, very well. And I think that, I think partly I was at that point so impressed by the sort of success and just the tier of the industry that this person had been working at for such a long period of time, that in hindsight, I probably brushed over certain things that were kind of maybe red flags in the interview, because I think I was sort of thinking, well, if we're going to scale our company to the next level, we need the best people. We need the people who've been in these, you know, in this sort of high level role before. But I think failed to consider, well, actually, if this person is so high level, why are they interviewing for what is essentially an entry level role at this like small music startup? But you know, stranger things have happened. And so I brought this person on, and very quickly it became clear that they had a quite a split focus on what they were trying to do. They were simultaneously trying to launch a sort of series of podcasts that they were wanting to executive produce and star in that was like outside of work, but also were very, very emotional and a very sort of, I don't know, like just high maintenance, I would say, like very emotionally expressive in the office in ways that were rather odd. And I think I was very much thinking, oh, we'll give this person the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they'll be really good after a couple of weeks. They've just got settled. And things just didn't really improve. And I think that, you know, after a few weeks, they hadn't really done anything. They were struggling with like really basic things, just, you know, how to format emails and things like that. And I think what became clear was that this person was not actually very, very successful in their own right. I think they had been in a long-term relationship with a very, very successful musician. And that had then turned into them just being around all of these things and sort of being this person's manager, while I think other people were probably doing the sort of grown-up work. And actually what that meant was this person was quite incapable of doing most things. And that honestly was very stressful, because I think that I went from this like real high of this person's going to be amazing, they've got such amazing experience, to firstly, we need to get rid of this person quite quickly because this is an absolute disaster. But also a kind of, that was a real learning moment, I think, because it was like, actually there was probably someone else who I interviewed who probably was a better fit. And I think that I got blinded by stuff that seemed really good. And you know, this person interviewed very well. And so I think, so there was a kind of a down point after that, where it was a bit like, that was a big blunder and I hired the wrong person. And it was very difficult to get rid of this person because they were very, even though they didn't really like the job, I think the idea of them being let go from the job, they didn't appreciate. And so it got a little bit messy for a few weeks.
So like, I think you've touched on a few things, but what is you said it was a learning curve, but what's the biggest takeaway? What's the biggest lesson from that experience?
I think the main thing is that and this is a challenge, I think, when you are the founder and the CEO and you're also doing the interview, is there has to be a level of distance that exists within the interview process, where you have to be so almost unemotional and cold in the way that you do that, which feels counterproductive in a way, because actually part of what I'm trying to gauge is, do I want to work with this person on a daily basis? And like, do I want to have a good vibe with this person? that is a complicated thing, I think, to navigate. But I think that, yeah, having done that in a colder way, or like in a more detached way, I think I would have noticed a few more of the red flags during the interview process, and particularly during the first sort of week or two of that person being in their sort of probationary period of working with us.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, so I think that's the main thing, is that it's sort of deferring the personal relationship until you have done the very impersonal, quite objective interview process, which
Yeah.
is,
I mean,
feels weird to do, but is
yeah.
probably necessary.
I mean, one of the things that we do here is we've started splitting the interviews out into different topics, and they'll be done by different people. I mean, we've got the fortunate position of maybe just having a slightly bigger team where you can put more people on recruitment and hiring and get like a common view across different team members. But there'll be one interview to assess skills, and there'll be one interview to assess culture. And the skills one will be done by like two people, and then the culture one will be done by two different people. And that's always interesting, because I think quite often one of the challenges that maybe you have is that it feels like a solo mission, this hiring thing, right? It's like you're putting the job ad out there, you're sourcing the candidates, you're screening the CVs, you're doing the interviews, and you're doing the decision making process. And actually sometimes just having a counter partner to spar with and to discuss with, and make sure that you're not getting like drawn into the biases too much, which is maybe what's happened here, being blindsided, like you say, by a perception of success and capability. So yeah, I think that's interesting. The other thing that we do is, and we started doing this recently, is we actually ask certain candidates for certain roles to perform a task in the interview. So going back to customer service again, one of the big things that people do in our business is they spend a lot of the time on the telephone speaking to customers. So like we want to hear them on the phone. So we literally take them, we put them in another room, we give them a phone, and then back in a different room, someone will call them and go through like a scripted role play. I think we do a scenario where they work at a cinema, and we're asking like, what time is this film on? And do you have sweet and salty popcorn? It's like it's random stuff. It doesn't really matter. But it's just like, how do you deal with that, and how do you actually sound on the phone? Because we were hiring people, we put them on the phones, and then they do it, and we're like, oh my god, they sound awful. I mean, I've got to get rid of them, or we've got to try and teach them, or they say like, oh, I've got this fear of the phone. Like, I'm like, why have you applied for a job where you've got a fear of the phone, where you're going to be on the phone all day? What we've learned is that like CVs and interviews and cover letters and application forms don't tell you that stuff.
No.
We've started doing these assessments, and we found that to be really interesting. So I don't know if that resonates or if that translates to maybe what you could think about, but I think we need to evolve. This like CV, cover letter, interview thing is going to get out, but if not already, is going to get outdated very, very soon.
Well, I had an interesting experience recently when we were hiring this most recent round of producers, where someone had sent in an application and sent in their examples of their material, and it was really good. And I got them onto an interview, and I got the impression quite quickly that they were like reading stuff during their interview, which is sort of okay. I know sometimes people like have the website up in front of them and they'll be like sort of talking through it or things like that. But actually, this person had glasses in their interview, so I could sort of see that whatever they were looking at was like updating quite regularly. Which is, I mean, basic. If you're trying to get away with something like that, don't have a reflective glass on your face. But they were using one of those things that like tracks the conversation that you're having in real time, and then uses an AI sort of LLM thing to tell you what to say next. And I saw this, and I was
How do you feel about that? I mean, I can't say I've encountered that. We do most of our interviews like face to face, but like, what did you think about that? How did you feel?
I was equal parts very impressed with their sort of technical know-how, because that level of detail is not necessary for that sort of initial interview for like a music production role before your probation project. So I was a bit like, whoa, okay, this person's very tech savvy. Like, I'd be interested to find out a bit more about this person. And then simultaneously, the downside of it was I was a bit like, well, that is a little bit dishonest. And I feel like
Yeah.
I admire you using initiative to like try and do this very well. But then when I think about it, really, this isn't that a high stakes an interview. It's not that intense. It's quite a sort of low key conversation, and you need to be a bit more confident in
Yeah.
your ability
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
be able to like have this conversation. Because also, the more I thought about it, the more I was like, if you actually aren't suitable for this role, that thing, the sort of perception that you've created using that thing is just going to dissolve on contact with air.
Yeah. I think like AI in hiring is definitely here. People are using it. We see
Mhm.
it in the applications that come through for our roles. One of the things we've started doing as well is to include what we call an Easter egg in the job application. So we write the job ad for LinkedIn, for Indeed, for our website, and it's not the longest, but it's a decent document. And right in the middle of the document, somewhere completely random, we just put one sentence where it says, make sure to include the word like sunflower in your application, full stop, and then you carry on, and it sort of picks back up with the job ad again. And then when you get to the application form, there is a question that says, what word did we ask you to include? And then when we're screening, if we do get a load, we can filter all the ones that have put the word sunflower in. And that just tells us that they've kind of read the whole job description and they are actually interested in it and they're taking it seriously.
That's cool.
And like you wouldn't believe the amount of people who ignore it or put like a question mark or just like, you didn't ask me to include any word. I mean,
That's
you can
very good,
spot,
that.
I think you can spot a lot of the AI usage a mile off. I think the M dashes give it away massively.
M dashes, and everyone's genuinely excited. The word
Yeah.
genuinely seems to be popping up a lot. Or the phrase sanity check. I've never heard that phrase used except when things have been written by AI.
Yeah.
Let's
Yeah.
sanity check this.
Yeah. I got an application the other day with a spelling mistake in the one of the like the fields for the application form, and I was genuinely pleased about that because I was like, yes, they've not used AI,
Yeah,
like this
yeah.
is a real person.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I don't want them to make spelling mistakes in the job that they're going to do, but also I was pleased to see they were,
Mm.
giving the process some human attention. But
Sure.
yeah, I mean, we could get into AI maybe in a whole nother hour. But listen, let's finish off, Joe. You've shared some really interesting stuff there, and it's great
All
to
right.
hear it from your perspective in your business. Right, so we're going to finish off with quick fire questions around hiring. So, Joe, give me one question you ask in every interview and why.
Can you explain how an audio compressor works as if I've been doing this for 10 minutes? Is
Okay.
that too specific? Shall I do one that's more recruitment, like more
No,
general?
no, not at all.
Are you sure?
So why do you ask that question? Like, why is that important to ask in every interview?
So it's important because it's a specific piece of software. I mean, previously hardware, but it's a specific
Yeah,
tool that we use when we're working on stuff. And I think the way that someone approaches that answer will show me if they are able to communicate a complex thing in a simple way, which is really important to being able to work with a whole range of experience levels of artists.
yeah, love it. Um, Education or experience?
I think they're the same thing. You just have to wear a uniform for one of them.
Culture fit or culture add?
I'd say culture fit, probably, because I
Yeah,
think that the culture grows because of the people in it. I don't think you can change the culture by adding a new person to it.
yeah, yeah. What is the biggest red flag you would see in the hiring process? What's the biggest red flag that you would respond to in the hiring process?
Someone asking, can you tell me what you guys do? Or can you
Yeah,
explain how it all works with you guys?
yeah. And green flag?
Having a really good understanding of what we do, or being able to point to specific projects or clients that we've worked with in the past.
Yeah. Um, what are your thoughts on how the candidate dresses for the interview?
To be honest, for producers, I only see their top half. So as long as that looks good, I don't mind. Anything below the desk is, you do what you want. Yeah.
And final question, CV or cover letter?
Cover letter. I think with us, the cover letter shows that they've read the job ad, because we say that you need to have a cover letter. But because we ask people to send their music, as part of their cover letter and sort of explain what it is. The cover letter is really important.
Yeah, awesome. Amazing. Joe, thank you so much, mate. I really appreciate you giving us this time to like delve into it. I think like whilst there is some feelings of, let's say, I don't know. I don't want to say like hatred or anything like that, but whilst hiring is one of those things that maybe you don't like love to do, I think I think you've done like a pretty amazing job. How many producers have you got?
28 who
28
are,
producers, yeah.
yeah,
And how many office?
3.
So it's like no matter which way you spin it, your organization relies on people to operate. And at the end of the day, you've got to keep your customer happy. Like your paying customer is there trying to get a produced piece of music, and that's what you've got to stay focused on. And it's like that whole thing: people buy from people, people respond to other people. So to been able to build that and build the business at the same time, I think like it's like I say, no matter which way you spin it, hiring is a real thing in your business, and done an awesome job with it.
Thank you.
So thanks for sharing your insights, and hopefully there are a couple of things that I can take away from this, and maybe a couple of things that you can take away from the chat we've had, and hopefully some just like interesting comparisons and learnings that anyone listening to this or reading this article can draw on as well. So yeah, you're the first one. So thanks for being the first as well, because this may not get like the most engagement ever, but hopefully it's the start of something interesting, as like I'm on this mission to promote the just like the learning and prioritization of hiring for small business owners. So thank you for your time, and thanks for your insights. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.